You're listening to Accounting for Growth, the podcast where growth leaders in accounting go beyond referrals alone and think bigger. I'm Chad Person, your host and the founder and president of Accounting CMO. Each episode, we bring in experts at the edge of accounting innovation to share quick, actionable insights that help you lead with confidence, drive smart growth, and move your firm forward. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Accounting for Growth podcast and our Managing Partner Reality series. In episode 1, we talked about talent and culture. In episode 2, we discussed technology and automation as capacity multipliers. Today, we're tackling one of the most, I think, uncomfortable but important topics for firm leaders, and that's client mix, it's pricing, it's that shift towards often advisory, right, services. Don Howard is back with me, of course, and today's conversation is really about how firms make growth really pay off for them. Welcome, Don.
Hey, Chad, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with kind of this, there's a lot to unpack, right? Like always, but like this idea of like why client mix is often a growth constraint for firms. I mean, I from my experience, most firms, they all want to grow, right? But they rarely ask, some of them, are challenged to ask, who they want to grow with or around, right? Is that, you see the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, one of the words that jumps out when you're talking about this is emotion. And that may seem strange in the accounting world, but I think when managing partners and the leadership team look at their current client list, it's hard to sit down and say, who do we really need to purge? I hate to use the word, but it's true. Purge and let them go on to something else, especially if you are the partner or the leader who brought that particular client in. So getting past that emotion and then looking at the data and actually saying, okay, this is the hard truth. These are the numbers in black and white. What do we need to do with what we're actually looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I agree with you. A number of clients for some time have been focused, I think, on this client culling, and that's fine. And I almost, again, I almost feel like some firms have even engaged in that activity because everybody else is, right? Everybody else is doing that, and clearly there's a shortage on talent, and there are capacity constraints. But that's another driver to do this. But again, taking a step back, taking the emotion out of every dollar is a good dollar, right? And which is how many firms were built, and saying, look, how do we want to grow? What do we want to become in the future, right? And based on that understanding, what client mix will get us there from a capacity perspective, from a profitability perspective. I mean, again, I think it's really about making decisions about what you want to become.
And I think that's a good point from the perspective of, and I get this as an entrepreneur myself. I'll take all the dollars. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter, and that's a starting proposition. So, to the understanding that in many cases these clients have evolved as it related to kind of taking on whatever particular client it is at that point, and you see that people get spread kind of thin as it relates to there's not an industry expertise. There's nothing necessarily that you can point to and say, this is who we are, because we're taking it from everybody.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And at the end of the day, and again, many firms have started down this path. I talked to a lot of firms that have done, a bit of culling out of those, primarily the clients that are kind of lower fee but high friction, right? Consuming a lot of senior capacity, et cetera. Makes sense. Again, I think from my perspective, it's having a clear picture of, this is my ideal client that I want to build my firm around, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to get off topic here, but positioning your firm to pursue those clearly in your messaging and your marketing, and then being willing to let go of those non-ideal clients if they can't be moved to become an ideal client. taking the emotion out of it. I love what you said there, Don, because it is a very emotional area, right, in the firm. It's
Yeah.
my client, right? It's my relationship, etc.
Well, and I also think, we talk about the quantitative reasons to potentially move a client off, but don't sleep on the qualitative piece
Mm,
of it too,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
said, I think your exact words were high friction. And for me, the wear and tear on your staff, I don't know if you put it down in a red, yellow, green and say, whew,
sure,
this is just
sure,
really tough
yeah,
on my, 2-year staff people or whatever it might be. But it doesn't need to be part of the equation in the conversation.
makes sense. Yep. So let's move on to another area here, which is more around this pricing pressure and this ever emerging value conversation that has been around for some time. I see firms often default, of course, to kind of the billable, the billable hour, right?
Yep.
That pricing model because it's what everybody knows, right? And although I feel like for more than a decade we've talked about moving away from the billable hour potentially or moving into more value pricing, et cetera. Um, I see most firms have not made that jump, at least the firms that I'm collaborating with consistently. Some have, but many have not. Your perspective on that?
Well, I think it's true to say that the client size is growing faster than their tolerance for
Mm,
fee
yeah,
increases
yeah,
for a variety of different reasons. Your client is looking at, yeah, we got bigger, but we have a pretty high expectation that you have factored in technology efficiencies, a
right.
variety of different things. So having that conversation with the client as they continue to grow, you can't just say, well, you guys have grown 10%. We need to, that
Yeah,
equates to whatever for us, because the client in this marketplace now has expectations that, yeah, we get it, but we hired you because we had the expectation that you're efficient in what you do and what you're bringing to us and using technology or whatever those things might be.
right. Yep. No, that makes sense. I mean, again, I think even though we're focused, many firms are focused on that billable hour still today. I think one of the notions that firms are continuing to kind of wrap their minds around and become comfortable with is this idea that oftentimes these pricing conversations they'll stall when it's about hours. What it should be about is outcomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think um, there's a lack of positioning by many of our firms, not only for existing client relationships, even in proposals for new business when we are um, positioning ourselves too price sensitive, especially when we're focused on um, the bottom line dollar amount and not the value and outcomes that we're able to achieve for the client.
Well, and those are all good points. And I think that if you look and you're the lead partner on a particular account and you're having that annual conversation where you're getting ready to slide over the new engagement letter with
Sure.
whatever the fee increase might be, my sense and what I have seen is that you will see leaders try to deflect that, try to say, well, here's, they go into sales mode, which is really not their first love for sure,
Sure.
versus saying, hey, I wanted to just point out some of the efficiencies that we brought you this year. Here is some tax savings,
Right.
whatever those things might be. That should be your lead off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let them rip it apart a little bit. Let them kind of dig into the numbers. But then after that, the hope is that you have positioned it well to be able to say, and based on these things and obviously industry inflation, things that are all going on
Sure.
here,
Sure.
here's what we're looking for. And it really goes back to Chad, that whole concept of the trusted advisor.
Mm.
And that means you're part of their team to some
Yep.
extent,
Yep.
so being able to have those hard conversations, you just gotta do it.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. It's something that has to happen, and I know you run your business, I run my business. We also can appreciate that it's not necessarily always the most comfortable conversation, but very very needed. So
Yeah.
so again, this what we're focused on here is really trying to to bear down on teaching partners, teaching staff to really start leading with impact, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think positioning the firm, like what you said, I think is spot on. And I know a few firms that have evaluated doing this, but like it's throughout each quarter at the end of the year, like you said, give them a value summary, right?
Hmm.
Walk them through the outcomes that you've helped them achieve and the impact that it's had on the performance of their business, right? Those
Yeah.
types of conversations are often what will lead to that reducing the fear of losing the client and frankly putting us in a position where we can demonstrate value and increase our margins through those price adjustments. Great.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on that one? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just kind of thinking of that whole process and using that conversation and whatever document that might be as your foundation for
Yeah,
the whole year.
yeah,
Chances are fairly good there will be some element of scope creep in there, and being able to kind of point back to, hey, just a reminder, here are the things that we have done that where we've helped you, and man, I just can't take that on, right? Like, so let's have a conversation and how do we both feel like we benefited from what it is you need to do and
sure.
what I've got to be able to do to take back to my management.
Yep. Nope. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, let's talk for a moment about like the whole point, right, of this move into, um, evaluating essentially where we're at from a pricing pressure perspective, what our client mix is, et cetera. We're focused on many firms, at least, are focused on making this jump from that compliance to advisory. And obviously, I talk to a lot of firms that all are seeking to move more into that advisory approach, but few are able to actually operationalize it. Oftentimes, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, what's your experience there?
I think there's an incredibly blurry line between compliance work and advisory. And certainly for the size of firm that we're talking about, that 8 to 30 million, again, it kind of goes back to one of the things we said at the onset of the conversation of we'll take anything, right? Like we're
Sure.
growing. This sort of smells like an advisory
Mhm.
project. Maybe we should dip our toes into it. And then it becomes where if you're not watching the pricing element of that, your clients are getting consulting slash advisory work at a compliance price.
Right.
So it's being vigilant. I feel like the leadership team, my assumption is they're getting together once a week and maybe talking about, I hope, some of these particular things. But it really comes down to putting pen to paper and
Yeah.
saying, okay, this is what we're seeing with what our clients are looking for. And I'm not giving it away, but I know I'm not getting the full value of what I'm providing.
Right.
So it's talk about it often and talk
Yeah.
about it soon. I think from a leadership perspective of are we doing this, and if so, let's set some intention on what that's going to look like.
Yeah, for sure. And again, ultimately, culling clients and having an ideal client profile and trying to put more attention. I mean, obviously, that's all as we just said in an effort to kind of move more towards that advisory firm, if you will, better margins, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I mean, you know, getting your partners, as you've suggested, start thinking that way, right? I
Mhm.
mean, because again, this advisory starts with honestly, it starts with questions, right? It's
Yeah,
about really
it is.
understanding the client's business, and it's not about the compliance or the work or even the advisory offerings. It's about cultivating that relationship, really understanding where their business is headed, and then again, of course, bringing in the resources that your firm has to offer into that relationship. And I think that the firms that have and help do this successfully have been the ones that have um, piloted programs where they are identifying clients that are either ideal today or believe can become ideal, and they are being very deliberate on getting their staff together inside their firm, talking about that client's business, where they're headed, and just being deliberate at bringing ideas to that organization that drive these additional questions, potential solutions, and ultimately more services, more advisory services.
Yeah. And, there's a training element to this, Chad, from bottom up as it relates to what should a 2-year staff person potentially, or a manager, whoever it might be,
Yeah.
if they hear X,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
an opportunity.
Yeah.
And what do they do with that? Because as we know, the billable hour is king or queen, however you want to look at it. And
Yep.
so when a staff person or manager or whomever is in front of a client, it's, oh, we got this much time. And we talked about that. Oh, our hour's up, whatever it might be. But
Right.
it's
Right.
listening to those things. If you're staff, taking it back to a manager or you're in charge or whomever and say, hey, I keep hearing this. What do I do about this? How do I help the firm capitalize on it? And again, accountants, many times I heard this, Dawn, I didn't go to college to be a salesperson. Well,
Sure.
we're not asking you to do that. We're asking you to recognize needs for your clients, bring it to the forefront, and then this is when it's recognizable and people can start talking about it. And I almost can guarantee you won't be the only one who brings it forward. There are other people who are having these kind of conversations with, frankly, not a good, clear roadmap of what the heck to do with them.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right, and I love what you're saying about, and you're right. Everyone in a firm, managers especially and up, even seniors and staff, if they have the access, but everybody has a role in growth, and using your ears, like you said, to listen for um, those statements from clients where it may be, new investments that they're making, potentially, looking at acquisitions or product launches, whatever it might be. There are
Sure.
opportunities for you to kind of bring that to the attention of the senior partners or managers on that team, and yeah, that can lead to those opportunities to ask those additional questions. I think that's spot on, and I also would say, the opportunity for you to, take a step back as a member of a client service team
Hmm.
and make a point to say each year we're not just going to connect with the client prior to peak season and say, do we have all of what we need? Have there been any major changes that are going to impact the work I'm going to do? There's an
Hmm.
opportunity to ask broader questions about what investments they're making in other areas of their business, people, technology, other areas that would impact growth. And again, I know it depends upon what your firm offers in terms of advisory services in some cases, but even that shouldn't be limiting because I think as a true advisor, you should be understanding where the business is headed and using the broad network you may have either in or outside of your firm to bring solutions in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other thing I would say, Chad, excuse me, is, do you have internally, as far as the accounting firm itself, an ambassador
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
advisory,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's got to be a head of the snake somewhere. And so, who is that person? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a partner. Maybe the partner serving in a, I say
Yeah.
advisory capacity, but how about a director or senior manager who's up and coming and has got the
Yeah.
right stuff and is asking all the right questions? That might be something, somebody's got to lead this at some point.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're chasing your tail and going in different directions as it relates to, well, and talk about inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I can see your realization rates already are, dropping from that perspective. So being able to say, okay, I'm going to go talk to Jack or Sally or whomever, and they are currently the person that's running with whatever we want to do with advisory. And frankly, that person should be a sponge, should be
Yeah.
listening to everything that's coming to them, compiling it in some way. Feels like AI would be a great way to use that.
Sure.
And then being able to report that back on a weekly basis or whatever people decide and
Right.
say, okay, holy cow, we are seeing an uptick in cybersecurity needs. I don't know, making these up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but recognizing that the drum is being beat from that perspective. And well, what are we doing with it? How are we capitalize on it? How do we capitalize on it? But then also, do we see a correlation between those things and we're dabbling in it and then that's why our realization is going down.
Right.
So
Right.
it doesn't have to be complex. It's just really sitting and having these conversations, getting the data on the table, putting it in an area where everybody can access and keeping the conversations going, not just during peak season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you made kind of the shift there to aligning, right? Once we have a sense of you know, what it takes to move to being more of an advisory focused firm,
Mhm.
getting partners, getting staff aligned, right? And you're right. I mean, that's often where things will stall because we're intellectually, maybe we all nod our heads, say, yeah, it makes
Right.
sense, but then operationally we go back and do the same thing we've
Right.
always done. So yeah, you're spot on. And you said find a leader. I agree. Find a partner. It doesn't have to be a partner. Not every partner needs to lead advisory, right? They're not
Mhm.
maybe made for that, but there should be a champion. There should be that storyteller. That should be that individual or individuals that can help us proof our concept, right?
Yeah.
And and own it, right? My experience is that shifts like this don't necessarily happen through, you know, consensus and that everybody has to play a major role. A handful of people can lead this, demonstrate that it works, and bring others along. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
yeah, yeah,
one of the areas, as you know, at your CMO, we talk about as far as our fundamentals is know where you are going.
yep, yep,
And frankly, that is really a second piece to where the heck are you?
yeah, yeah,
So we toss around advisory or consulting, and we know it's probably a good idea. We know we might be able to charge higher fees for it, et cetera, et
yep,
cetera. It might be
yep,
more exciting work for our client, for our staff. But where are we? Like really?
right,
How are we staffed up for it? What does our capacity look like? Does this require we bring in recruiting and we have to start looking for a person with, the skill level or what have you? And
sure,
then it's I know I'm making it sound very simple. I know it's not.
right,
And then, well, what do we want to be? And get marketing involved sooner than later when you start having those conversations.
yes,
Maybe business development, sales, whoever actually is kind of running that game of, okay, because it's great if we have this plan of where we want to be, but if none of our marketing collateral even addresses it, it's going to be very confusing to people who, I mean, as you know, and I won't get the percentage right, but something like 80 some percent of folks are on looking at your website first.
right,
And so
right,
is what you are saying match with what you want to do and where you're going? And I do think that's an area that gets left
mm,
until too late or very late. And then it becomes harder to dig out of that hole. So
yeah,
I would just say bring everybody in the boat with you as you're having these conversations. If you need to jettison some folks later, that's totally fine. There'll be a
yep,
core group of advisors that are working on this,
yep.
but don't do it alone.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. As we kind of close this episode up, I think you're right to almost go back to the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean the fundamental you mentioned of know where you're going. I think that is so true. That's the key. We talked about it kind of early on, which is have a clear sense of what kind of firm you want to become. And then everything from there can work. We can kind of work backwards from from a
Yeah,
staff perspective, from a ideal client profile perspective, from hard decisions often on what clients we keep, what clients we potentially let go or find other alternatives for. I think all those are key. And again, in kind of wrapping this up, I would say that it's about making choices. It's about choosing to prioritize your time because that's one thing we can't create more of.
hmm,
And when you don't make these choices, when you don't prioritize the investments you want to make in time and effort and marketing, et cetera, then essentially what you're saying is you're saying yes to everything, right?
right.
And I think we can all appreciate in today's environment that's something that simply won't work. Any final note before I sign us off on this episode?
Sure. I think just to continue to beat this drum, talk about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of knowledge kind of stuck in heads during this time of the year.
Yep.
So making a true cognizant effort to have that conversation and get it out on the table, or you're going to be doing the exact same thing next year.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it goes back to what we were talking about earlier is if you truly are saying you want to evolve to become this, that doesn't happen overnight and it doesn't happen by accident. So
Yep.
being
Yep.
really focused on it.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I mean, a lot of firms, they're getting ready to go into, a busy tax season. There's really not a busy season anymore, but it's peak season is kind of on the horizon for sure. And so, if I would say to firms that have made these kind of decisions, maybe even called a few clients over the last year or two, continue to put your eye on what kind of firm you want to become. Get great clarity around that. This experience that you're getting ready to encounter over the next few months and serving this great number of clients. Never forget what you're trying to become, and there could be real opportunities to make better investments, to make decisions on how we're going to serve clients in the future after that peak season. And of course, Don and I are always happy to help think through that. So thanks everybody for today. Don, thank you. Growth isn't just about adding clients, as we've talked about today. It's really about adding the right clients and the right value. Next episode, I'm super excited about. Don and I are going to shift to firm governance and how structure and accountability either enable or often can block scalable growth. Thanks for joining us today, and until next time, keep accounting for growth. That's a wrap on this episode of Accounting for Growth, powered by your CMO. We help accounting leaders break the status quo. Please subscribe, share, and stay sharp. Your next big growth move starts now.